welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're diving into a feeling I think many of us know,
Mm-hmm.
that sense of being stuck, or maybe just being carried along by life, sort of like a leaf in a stream.
Yeah,
We're going to explore this from a couple of, well, really interesting angles, hopefully give you a fresh perspective on what this feels like in your own experience.
exactly. And picture that image you just mentioned, the river and the leaf. It's a good starting point.
Right.
In your own life, do you ever feel like that leaf, just drifting wherever the current takes you?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes.
Or do you have a sense of being more like the river itself, something dynamic that can maybe shape its own course?
That's a great question to start with.
That simple image is really where we begin today.
Okay, let's really think about that leaf for a second.
Mm-hmm.
In your own life, have you had those times where you just felt completely at the mercy of events?
Oh, sure.
Like a leaf tumbling downstream. It's a very passive feeling, isn't it?
It is. You're just reacting.
Yeah.
And here's something fascinating. We often hear about being in the flow, which sounds great, feels active and engaging.
Right, positive.
But there's this other side where you feel swept along, maybe even in a direction you don't really want to go.
Right.
And that's where the idea of your inner freedom comes in. Even when life feels like a relentless current, your ability to choose your attitude, that's your ultimate power.
Even in tough situations.
Even then. So think about your own life. Where might you have, maybe unconsciously, surrendered that inner choice lately without even realizing it?
That's a powerful question.
Yeah.
It's almost as if it's easier sometimes, isn't it? To just go along with what's happening around us.
It can seem easier, yeah.
It reminds me of someone I used to work with, Sarah. On the surface, she always seemed, fine, doing everything expected of her as manager.
Okay.
But underneath, there was this sense of, well, almost nothingness.
Yeah.
A real lack of personal spark or engagement.
Like she wasn't really there.
Exactly. It made me wonder then, and it makes me wonder now about our own lives. How often are we just doing what's expected, but missing something really crucial for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever felt that disconnect in your own experience?
Oh, absolutely. And that feeling Sarah experienced really highlights something important about how we perceive our lives.
Okay, like what?
Well, think of your daily routines, your tasks. They're in the foreground of your awareness, right? They're what you're actively focused on.
Yeah, the stuff you have to do.
Right. But then there's everything else, your potential, maybe deeper desires, all the other possibilities in your life.
Uh-huh.
And that can fade into the background, almost out of sight.
So you lose perspective.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like you get so focused on the immediate tasks that you lose sight of the broader landscape of your life. Does that imbalance, between the routine and a bigger sense of possibility, does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. It's like the comfort of what we know, the familiar routine, it can become a kind of invisible fence,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
limiting what we even consider possible.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think this feeling of just drifting can be so,
Mm-hmm.
well, seductive?
Mm-hmm.
What's the initial appeal?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how our minds work, it really comes down to how we naturally organize information. It's about figure and ground.
Figure and ground. Right?
Those familiar routines, the expectations from society, maybe our own internal scripts, those become the clear focal point, the
Yeah.
figure.
What stands out?
Exactly. And everything else, all those broader possibilities, they recede into the background, the ground, almost as if they don't exist for us anymore.
It makes me think of that analogy, the fish in a tank.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the glass walls become the absolute boundary of their world. They can't see beyond it, so they don't even question if there's anything else.
Right. It's their entire reality.
Yeah.
Precisely. And it makes you think about all the choices in your own life that might be happening almost on autopilot,
Mhm.
simply because you haven't even perceived that other options exist. It's kind of a sobering thought, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
So if we find ourselves in this state of drift, this sort of comfortable numbness maybe, what can be the thing that wakes us up?
Yeah.
What's that signal? That little nudge that tells us something isn't quite right?
Well, what's fascinating and maybe a bit counterintuitive is that resistance, something we often view as negative.
Yeah, we try to avoid it.
Right. But it can actually be that wake-up call for you. Think about those moments in your own life when you felt a really strong pushback against something, a gut feeling of no.
Okay.
That's not necessarily just you being difficult or stubborn. It can be your whole system telling you that something isn't aligning with your deeper self, that the current you're drifting in isn't right for you. Can you recall a time when you experienced that kind of visceral resistance.
I can definitely think of moments like that.
Yeah.
It's an uncomfortable feeling, though, that inner conflict.
It is uncomfortable, absolutely. But if we connect this back to the idea of figure and ground, what's in the foreground and what's in the background,
Okay.
that resistance often arises when there's a mismatch. What
Yeah.
you're actively focusing on, the figure, maybe it's a career path or a relationship, isn't in harmony with your broader values and desires lurking in the background, the ground.
I see. The things that really matter deep down.
Exactly. Think about someone who achieves a lot of external success, gets the promotions, the money, but feels deeply unfulfilled inside.
Right. We hear about that a lot.
That internal resistance, that sense of unease, is actually a valuable signal. It's telling them something needs to shift in their life.
Right.
It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's a necessary tension. It can drive you towards growth.
That makes a lot of sense. So that friction, it can actually be the catalyst for us to change direction.
Precisely.
So it's not just about trying to be in control all the time or, the opposite, completely surrendering to whatever happens.
No, exactly.
There's a balance to be found, isn't there?
Exactly. That either view, control versus surrender, it's very limiting for you. It's more about this ongoing interplay, this dance.
A dance. I like that.
Think back to that image of the sailor we mentioned, maybe implicitly.
Okay.
They're not trying to overpower the wind or pretend it doesn't exist. They're using their skill and awareness to harness it, to work with it to navigate their course.
Right. Using the current, not fighting it necessarily.
Yes, it requires both intention and responsiveness.
So it comes back to your own awareness, doesn't it? Really understanding the forces at play in your life, both internal and external, and then making conscious choices within that context.
Precisely. Your perception isn't just passively receiving information like a camera, you are actively shaping your reality
That's so.
through how you direct your attention and how you interpret your experiences. So for you, reclaiming your sense of agency, that feeling of being the driver, not the leaf, it starts with that very act of becoming more aware of what's truly going on for you.
And that leads us to this idea of the field of possibility, right? It sounds like our own perception can really narrow down what we even believe is possible for ourselves.
That's a really insightful connection.
Yeah.
Your own focus can create these invisible boundaries for yourself.
Invisible boundaries. Okay.
The field, in this sense, is everything that is potentially available to you. All the options, feelings, paths. But often, you and I, we operate in a much smaller version of that field.
Why is that?
Because our attention becomes so narrowly focused, that tunnel vision we talked about earlier.
Right. The person fixated on their career.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. They might literally not see other avenues for fulfillment or happiness that are right there, just outside their narrow beam of focus. Does that resonate with your own experiences? Getting fixated on something and maybe missing other things?
It definitely does. It's like you put on blinders,
Yeah.
and miss everything else happening around you.
Yes. So the first sign, perhaps, of feeling really stuck, of that inner lack of freedom, is this inability to see beyond that immediate thing we're focused on.
That dominant figure in our life.
Exactly. The broader landscape of your life, all those other possibilities, it becomes fragmented. Your sense of what you can do, your own agency, feels diminished.
Like you said, only seeing one tree in a vast forest.
Precisely. And as we touched on, the way out of that, the antidote for you, is awareness.
Becoming aware of the blinders.
Yes. It's consciously recognizing both what you're focusing on right now, the figure, and the broader context of your life, the ground. Asking yourself, what other possibilities might be just outside the edges of my current awareness?
That's a powerful question to ask regularly.
It really is.
Okay. Now, another interesting concept that came up is unfinished Gestalt. That sounds a bit technical. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah.
What might that feel like in someone's life?
Sure. Think of them simply as unresolved experiences, emotions, or even tasks that are still kind of open loops in your mind.
Open loops. Okay.
There's a natural human tendency towards completion, towards closure. When something is unfinished, it can keep subtly pulling at your attention until it finds some kind of resolution.
Like a song stuck in your head.
Exactly. That's a great example.
Yeah.
You need to hear the end. Or maybe an argument you had where you didn't get to say everything you wanted.
Ah, right. That feeling afterward.
That nagging feeling of something unresolved. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of something hanging over you, even if you can't quite put your finger on what it is sometimes.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of your life, these unfinished gestalts can show up as unfulfilled dreams.
Yeah.
Unresolved conflicts with people in your life, or even unexpressed emotions. Imagine someone who always wanted to learn, say, a musical instrument but never did.
Okay.
That desire, that unfinished something, it can create a subtle undercurrent of dissatisfaction in their life, even if they're not consciously thinking about it every day.
So it just lingers there.
It can, yeah. This unresolved tension can actually drain your energy. It can even lead to feelings of frustration or maybe even self-sabotage in other areas. It's like a constant low-level hum in the background of your awareness. So for you, the second sign of feeling stuck might be these unresolved tensions, these open loops that are holding you back without you even fully realizing it.
So if we recognize these open loops in our lives, these unfinished bits, what do we do about them? How do we bring them to some kind of closure?
Well, the key here is what we could call active completion.
The active completion, okay.
It's about consciously bringing those unresolved elements into your awareness, acknowledging them, and then actively engaging with them.
Engaging how?
Now, that doesn't always mean going back and achieving the original goal exactly as you first imagined it. That might not be possible or even desirable anymore.
Right.
Sometimes completion for you might involve acceptance, or maybe finding a new way to honor that original impulse or need in your current life.
So it's about addressing it consciously.
Yes. The very act of bringing it into your conscious awareness and actively doing something with it, even if that something is letting it go with awareness, is what helps to restore a sense of balance and close that loop.
That makes sense. It's about acknowledging it and engaging with it in some way rather than just letting it linger in the background and, like you said, drain our energy.
Precisely.
Now, we also touched on the balance between what's in the foreground, the figure, and what's in the background, the ground of our awareness. How does an imbalance there contribute to this feeling of being stuck for us?
Yeah, that balance is crucial. What's insightful here is that a healthy and fluid dynamic between what you're actively focused on and the broader context of your life is really key for navigating effectively.
Okay. So what happens when it's out of balance?
Well, if you have an excessive focus on the foreground, let's say, obsessively trying to control every single detail of a project at work.
Micromanaging everything.
Exactly. You become blind to the bigger picture.
Right.
Blind to the natural flow of things, maybe blind to unexpected opportunities or collaborators that might arise in the background.
Right.
That rigidity, that overfocus on the figure can actually create more stress for you and ultimately limit your sense of agency, paradoxically.
It feels like you're in control, but you're actually less adaptable.
That's a great way to put it. Have you ever felt that pressure of trying to control everything too tightly?
Oh, definitely. It's exhausting, for one thing. And it often feels like the more you try to control, the more things seem to slip through your fingers anyway.
Yes.
It's like trying to micromanage a river, like we said, rather than just steering your boat within it.
Exactly. A perfect analogy. And the opposite extreme is also a form of this inner lack of freedom for you.
Which is?
When the background overwhelms the foreground. That's the aimless drifting we talked about right at the start.
Ah, okay. No focus at all.
Right, where you can't focus on anything long enough to bring it to fruition. You're just tossed about by every little current. So the third sign of feeling stuck might be this inability to find that fluid balance.
Either too rigid or too scattered.
Yes, between what you're actively focusing on in your life and the broader context in which you're living.
Okay, so we've talked about the limits of our perceived possibilities, these unresolved open loops, and finding balance in our focus. What's another piece of this puzzle for us? What else contributes to feeling stuck?
Well, the role of your attention itself is absolutely critical here.
Our attention. Okay.
Your attention, in essence, drives your perception. It's what determines what becomes the foreground, the figure of your awareness at any given moment.
Right, what we notice.
Exactly. And this can happen consciously when you deliberately choose to focus on something, but very often it operates unconsciously, driven by habit or external distractions or internal anxieties.
The phone buzzing, the worry popping up.
All of that. And when your attention is on autopilot, it just reinforces existing patterns in your life, which can definitely keep you feeling stuck in those patterns. Can you think of habits of attention, maybe things you habitually focus on or ignore that might be keeping you in a rut?
The example of multitasking really jumps out here, doesn't it? It often feels like we're being productive by juggling multiple things.
The myth of multitasking.
But maybe we're actually just scattering our focus. We're not really attending to anything deeply.
Precisely. You're dividing your attention across multiple things, and nothing really comes into clear focus. Nothing gets your full presence.
Yep.
Over time, this can erode your ability to sustain attention, to engage deeply with any single aspect of your experience. It can contribute to that feeling of a shallow existence where nothing truly resonates or feels satisfying.
That makes sense, just skimming the surface.
Exactly. So for you, the fourth sign of feeling stuck might be this mismanagement of your attention, this constant fragmentation.
So the way to address this for ourselves is to be more intentional with our attention, to cultivate that mindful attention we hear about.
Exactly that. It's about consciously choosing where to direct your awareness, setting intentions for your focus. By prioritizing what truly matters to you and learning to resist, or at least notice, the constant pull of distractions, both internal and external. It's about reclaiming control, in a sense, of that steering wheel of your mind.
Okay, this is all incredibly insightful. Now, the idea you mentioned of a breakthrough insight, this paradox of effortlessness, that sounds really intriguing, especially given everything we've just talked about focus and attention.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting for you, perhaps a bit paradoxical, like you said.
Okay, I'm ready.
While we've talked a lot about the importance of conscious effort, awareness, attention, there's this deeper layer.
Which is?
True freedom, genuine ease, can actually arise from learning to surrender to the natural rhythms of life rather than constantly striving and trying to control everything.
Surrender. That sounds passive again, doesn't it?
It can sound that way, but consider this. That underlying belief that you always need to be in control, that constant striving, that inability to let go, that can actually be the fifth sign of feeling stuck, of inner slavery, really.
Wow. So trying too hard to be free makes us less free.
In a way, yes. Does that challenge some of your own assumptions about how to move forward in life?
It really does. We're often told, to achieve things, we need to push harder, exert more willpower, make it happen. This idea of effortlessness. It almost feels like giving up or being lazy.
You can feel that way from our usual perspective, but think about the natural wisdom within you. Let's call it organic self-regulation.
Okay.
Just like your body automatically regulates your temperature or your breathing without you having to consciously tell it what to do.
Right, it just happens.
Your mind and your life have an inherent capacity to find balance, to heal, to move towards wholeness if you allow them to. The problem is, we often interfere with this natural process.
How do we interfere?
By imposing all sorts of artificial constraints, rigid expectations, trying to force outcomes in a certain way, often based on fear or external pressures.
That makes me think about trying to hold your breath for as long as possible.
Oh, good example.
Eventually, your body will just take over, right?
Man.
No matter how strong your willpower is in that moment, you have to breathe.
Exactly. There are limits to sheer willpower against that deeper organic wisdom. And sometimes the most effective and freeing thing you can do for yourself is to trust that deeper wisdom, to yield when it feels appropriate.
Yielding. Not collapsing, but consciously letting go.
Yes. It's about discerning when to take action, when to steer, and when to allow things to unfold, when to perhaps adjust the sails rather than trying to change the wind.
Okay.
Where in your own life might you be trying too hard to control outcomes? Perhaps even working against the natural flow of things without realizing it.
That's definitely something I need to reflect on.
Wow.
Wow, so bringing it back to that initial image, the river, it's not about constantly fighting the current or even mastering it necessarily,
Right.
but about understanding its nature and learning how to navigate it effectively with skill and awareness.
Precisely. True freedom isn't about mastering the river in the sense of dominating it. It's about understanding its inherent nature, its currents, its eddies, its power.
And our place within it.
Yes.
Bang.
And finding that dynamic balance between your desire for control, that foreground of your intentions, your goals, and the inherent unpredictability and flow of life, that broader background of forces at play.
And that's where the analogy of the skilled dancer moving with the music comes in again,
I
right?
think so, yes.
It's not about the dancer controlling the music. They can't. It's about responding to it, participating fully in it,
Yeah,
expressing something through that interaction.
exactly. There's a philosopher, Martin Buber, who talked about the I-thou relationship.
Okay.
That sense of mutual presence, authentic connection, genuine encounter, rather than an I-it relationship where the other is just an object to be used or controlled. Finding your agency in life isn't about trying to dominate or control everything, the it. It's more like cultivating that thou relationship with life itself, that kind of engaged participation, that willingness to respond authentically to what's happening around you and within you.
Engaged participation.
Yeah.
I like that much better than just surrender. It feels more active.
It is active. It requires immense awareness and presence.
This whole idea of life itself as an unfinished gestalt is also really striking. That feels quite profound. It challenges that traditional view of needing to have everything neatly tied up and completed, doesn't it?
It really does. What's insightful here, I think, is that this perspective invites you to embrace the open-endedness of your own life.
The fact that it's always evolving.
Yes. It's a continuous process of becoming, unfolding, rather than just a series of achievements or tasks to be ticked off a list.
Which is how we often treat it, isn't it? The checklist life.
We do. And the danger for you, for all of us, lies in living as if life were just a checklist.
Yeah.
While those milestones can provide temporary satisfaction checking the box, they often leave you with this underlying yearning for something deeper. For that sense of wholeness that comes not just from completion, but from engaging with the ongoing process of living.
So it's about appreciating the journey itself, the process, not just fixating on some distant destination or final completed state.
Absolutely. Think about the concept of biophilia, a love of life in all its forms, in its process.
A love of the process itself.
Yes, it's about savoring the unfolding, even when things are uncertain or feel incomplete. Like an artist who finds joy and meaning in the very act of creation, in the mixing of the paint, the shaping of the clay, even before the final piece is finished, maybe especially then.
That's a beautiful image. And ultimately, this whole exploration we've been on today, this quest for understanding that dance between control and surrender, figure and ground, completion and process, it feels like a really fundamental, almost philosophical endeavor, doesn't it?
It really does.
It connects with those bigger questions about meaning, purpose, and living authentically.
It absolutely does. This perspective, drawing on Gestalt ideas and others, really emphasizes the importance of living in accordance with your deepest values, embracing the inherent uncertainty of life.
Which isn't easy.
No, it takes courage. And being willing to step outside of those familiar, comfortable patterns, those habitual ways of seeing and being that might be keeping you feeling stuck.
Right, the known territory.
But what's crucial for you to remember, I think, is that authenticity isn't a fixed state. It's not like you arrive there one day and you're done.
So it's not another checklist item.
Exactly. It's an ongoing practice, a moment-to-moment choosing, thinking you've found all the answers, that you've arrived at authenticity or freedom, that can actually lead to a new kind of stagnation.
A new form of being stuck.
A new form of that inner lack of freedom, yes.
Right.
Mistaking temporary clarity for some ultimate final resolution.
So as we come towards the end of this deep dive, it feels like we've really touched on some core aspects of how we relate to our own lives, our perception, our choices.
Indeed. And I hope it's left you and everyone listening with some valuable questions to maybe sit with.
Questions like,
Well, what does freedom truly mean to you in your own lived experience? How do you currently navigate that constant interplay, that dance between needing to exert control or influence in your life and learning when to yield, when to surrender to the flow of things? And how do you engage with those unfinished aspects of your own life, those open loops, those incomplete stories?
these aren't meant to be easy answers, are they? More like invitations.
Exactly. Invitations for your own ongoing exploration and reflection. It's a continuous process of becoming more aware.
And maybe accepting that we won't figure it all out.
Absolutely. Acknowledging that some parts of life will always remain a mystery, and that's perfectly okay. That uncertainty is part of the richness, perhaps.
Yeah, part of the dance.
Exactly. You are both the active agent in your own life, the sailor, the dancer, and you are an integral part of this larger flowing current, the river, the music.
It's not either.
No. The invitation may be to embrace that duality, to steer your course with intention and awareness while also learning to move with grace and responsiveness. And through that, to discover the infinite possibilities that lie within that dynamic interplay in your own unique experience.